What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory, Waldron, and special guest Robert Flom, managing editor of Clips Nation. What's up, guys? How we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Rob, welcome back to the pod. Had you on last year for the Clippers preview series. Good to have you on again. And Nick, always a pleasure. It's been but like 10 days since we talked, which is like a record for us lately. But happy to get this preview series started.
Exactly. I'm pumped to get this started. Like you mentioned, Kory, Robert was on last year to help us preview the Clippers. This year, we're doing things a little bit different. We're going by division. Kory and I decided that'd probably be a little bit smoother. And first up in the Pacific Division, Los Angeles Clippers, obviously crazy offseason, but we're going to talk a little bit about last year first. Clippers finished 48-34, 8th seed, went 6 games with the Warriors before being knocked out of the playoffs, but a really successful season. Obviously, you saw the results in the offseason, but what emoji would you guys use to describe the Clippers from last year?
I would probably see. I'm not good with names, but it's easy to describe. It's the one like the snorting one with the smoke coming out of the nostrils. That one.
What do you got, Kory?
For me, it's the wow face, the shocked face, with the eyebrows and like the mouth open. Maybe like the one with the buck teeth showing even, because it was one of those years where I didn't have high expectations for the Clippers, but this was a team all year long that was just consistent. They were a threat in the West. We saw in the first round matchup against the Warriors them really give the Warriors a tough time. It was just a surprising year to see this team with, I don't want to say misfits, because these guys are really good players, and Gallinari, Beverly, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell obviously being a Sixth Man of the Year candidate as well. It was just a year where it was a gritty team. It was just like a wow year for me when it comes to the Clippers.
Especially after, the trades and stuff, you didn't think, all right, maybe they'll fall off a little bit. Nah, this is still a gritty team. So I went with a boxing glove because I felt like they had a fighting chance in every game they were in. And we saw that in the postseason. Not many people anticipated them going 6 games with Golden State. And they gave them a run for their money. Obviously, if Kevin Durant wasn't one of the best players in the world, they maybe could have won that series. So big year for the Clippers. What would be the biggest positive takeaway from last season?
So it's actually pretty funny because I'd say the biggest positive takeaway from last season isn't on the team anymore, and that for me would be the play of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I thought he had a pretty spectacular rookie season. It was overlooked by Luka Doncic and Trae Young, and even to a lesser extent like Ayton and Jaren Jackson Jr., who both had really good seasons. But I thought he was extremely good. He played better as the season went along, and when Avery Bradley was taken away, he kind of was unfettered a little bit. So yeah, I thought his play and just maturity and potential for upside was really the biggest positive takeaway from last season. And he got traded away, but maybe the Paul George trade doesn't happen without him having the rookie season that he did.
So my biggest positive takeaway is, it's kind of hindsight 2020, but for the fact that the Clippers were able to show the league, more importantly, Kawhi Leonard and guys like Paul George, that there was a core and nucleus in place on the Los Angeles Clippers roster that could maybe be exploited to another level, with Doc Rivers leading the charge. So my biggest takeaway is the fact that the Clippers showed that they had the team in place that you add a star to, they could be serious threats in the West.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, they changed perspective of themselves around the league, and that resulted in a positive offseason. But I really like that one, Robert. If Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't play that great, maybe they're not able to do the Paul George trade. Obviously, they gave up a lot of first-round picks, but he was the key prospect in that trade. So that's a really good one. On the negative side, what would you say was the biggest negative takeaway? This was a hard one because I couldn't really think of any myself.
There aren't a ton. I think you could go with 2. For me, one of them was the Avery Bradley thing, where Doc Rivers kept playing him big minutes even though he was awful, because he's a veteran with a reputation. And this team that they have this year is super deep, but there's a chance one of their veterans isn't very good, and Doc continues to play him anyway because he knows him and trusts him even though maybe he shouldn't. The other one is probably that they were extremely healthy last year, and they are probably unlikely to be as healthy this year, so some of their success might be a bit tempered. There are some people running away with, their being like the best defense ever and winning, 60 games or whatever. I don't think that happens because I think last year they kind of lucked out injury-wise, and I doubt that happens again.
Especially with guys like Kawhi and Paul George who have had those nagging injuries over their career.
Yeah. Them, Pat Beverly, Lou Williams, these are all injury-prone players, and I don't think the Clippers are making it through I mean, Paul George is already probably going to miss time with injury, but it wouldn't be surprising to see him or Kawhi or any of those guys miss more sometime later in the season.
I'll probably just piggyback off that being negative because I really didn't see a lot of negative takeaways. I mean, if you want, I mean, the fact of the matter is you got rid of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, which I guess could be a negative because he's young, but they got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in return, so it's not really a negative when you lose a young asset, and you're getting star players. So I think the fact that they were so healthy could be a negative takeaway because it's very rare that it happens.
Yeah, I think the Avery Bradley thing was really the only negative vibe I saw around Clippers Twitter last year. You didn't really see a ton of complaints about things other than Bradley, so I think that's a great one right there. Now, we're still going to include the OTG power rankings into these previews, and coming into the season, the OTG staff had the Clippers at number 1. Do you guys think this is a fair ranking or too high?
I mean, I'm maybe showing myself a little. I'm a little unfamiliar. Is this overall ranking? Is this
overall? Yep. The entire site. This is number 1 out of 30 teams. This is where the staff put them.
So I think in terms of being maybe the best overall team, if healthy and clicking on all cylinders, I think that's fine. If you're doing it by regular season ranking, I think that's high. I don't think they're going to be a top 3 team record-wise. I don't know if they're even going to be a top 5 team record-wise. They have injuries. They have some older players they're going to load manage. They're going to need time to integrate their players. I think, they're going to win a lot. They're obviously going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to have home court advantage. But it wouldn't surprise me if they won like 52 or 53 games instead of around 60 or so. So if it's regular season, probably a little too high. Even in terms of winning the championship, I mean, I think certainly they could if they're healthy and, a few things fall their way. But I think, honestly, Eastern Conference teams, I think the Bucks and Sixers should probably be favored to win the championship right now, just because their road to get there is much easier. So I'd say it's slightly high.
I think it's fair, but I think you make some great points, Rob, in the fact that if we're going off the fact that this team, like Paul George, for example, probably is going to be healthy at the start of the season. If this team is fully healthy, I think this team is the best team as of right now on paper. I love their defense, versatility. I love the fact they have a lot of offensive weapons. This is a deep roster. But you make a good point is there is going to be load management. Who knows how many games we actually see Kawhi play this year? How do they manage some of the older guys on the roster? I think that's all stuff to take into the consideration. But I think 1 is overall fair because if you look at just the talent on the depth chart, this is an extremely talented team.
Yeah, I think it's not a terrible take if you have them as number 1 as your favorite to win a championship. But I would probably lean with the Bucks at number 1 because they'll have a really good regular season. And like you mentioned, Robert, they'll probably have an easy ride to the finals. Maybe they'll have to deal with the Sixers. But I think the Bucks, especially because they're carrying over so many players, and you look at the Clippers, they're going to have to get some new pieces to gel a little bit. And then the whole Paul George thing. But I think it's fair if you want to have them as the number 1 team to win a championship because they're definitely top 3, top 5 favorite.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't make fun of anybody who had them as the number 1 seed. I mean, I think obviously they're extremely good and, they're probably going to be a really good team this year. But, I just it's also the Clippers pessimistic. So,
Yeah, no, I feel you. I mean, they did a great job trying to change that perspective and hopefully get things in more of a positive vibe. Before we move on to talking about next season, just a quick reminder, you can find the show on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTG Basketball, Google Play, and as well YouTube. Also grab yourself some OTG merchandise at DesignTree/OffTheGlass. Use discount code OTG5 to get $5 off. But going into the offseason, let's talk draft picks first. Obviously, that's not the splash move, but we'll ease our way in. Fiondu Cabanelli was selected with the 27th pick via the Nets, and then 48th pick Terrence Mann. What do you think about these two, Robert?
So I was not a huge fan of Cabanelli as a pick. He's a player who doesn't really fit into what I like to see from basketball players, which is, guys who can pass, move the ball. I think that's really necessary in the modern NBA, maybe more than anything else. Is guys who can make quick reads on the court, and this is a guy who had a notoriously awful assist-to-turnover ratio in college. But he's athletic, and he can really shoot the ball for a big man. So I'm fine with that pick. Terrence Mann, I thought, was a really good pick at the time. And I know it's Summer League, but he looked fantastic in Summer League. He was a better ball handler than I thought. The Clippers were running him at point guard, even though he'd been a wing in college. Really good rebounder, fantastic finisher inside. Really, for him, it all comes down to shooting. If he can shoot, he's probably going to have a very nice NBA career. If not, he might be around the fringes. But still, for the 45th pick, I think he was really good. So overall, I was pretty high on their draft. I think I gave it like a B or a B plus. It wasn't out of this world amazing, like the Pelicans draft, or I think even the Celtics draft was pretty incredible, or the Grizzlies. But they had a pretty good draft considering what they came into.
Do you think these two will see any minutes this season, or mostly just developmental year, and then maybe in the future they'll have a role?
I think this year will be mostly on the bench, practicing, and then Agua Caliente G League. I mean, I think Cab might get a few minutes if there's an injury to a big man. If Paul George and Kawhi both load manage the same game, and like maybe Pat Beverly does too or something, man might get minutes either at point guard or at wing. I don't think either of them will play 0, but I'd be pretty surprised if they had played more than like 5 or 6 games like in the rotation. Maybe like 20 or 30 games total, mostly garbage time.
Gotcha. Kory, any thoughts on these two?
No, when it comes to draft stuff, I'll let Rob handle that.
Now, moving over to free agency, obviously this is a big splash. Acquisitions, Kawhi Leonard signed, big trade for Paul George, also picked up Mo Harkless in a multi-team trade. Now, usually we would just talk about what's your favorite move, but this was obviously the splashiest offseason maybe of the entire NBA world. But Rob, tell us how you felt during this whole ordeal, because going into it, at one point it seemed like it was between the Lakers and the Raptors for Kawhi Leonard. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Clippers swipe in, grab Paul George, land Kawhi, and now they're back to being a super team like many people anticipated going into the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever ruled them out of the Kawhi stuff. I mean, the Lakers thing was very obviously smoke, probably mostly from Rob Pelinka. So, I think there were certainly some signs that they weren't doing great, but I was always fairly confident. I think throughout the period, I had them as, slight favorites, 54% or something to land Kawhi. Them getting Paul George was definitely surprising. I thought they would make a push for another star player, but I did not expect Paul George to be available, nor did I expect the Clippers to give up a mother load of assets for that star player. I thought it would be something like Landry Shamet, Danilo Gallinari, and 2 first-round picks for Bradley Beal or something. But instead, they went big and they got Paul George and Kawhi. Obviously, those moves are incredible. They have some downside because both of them are only on 2-year contracts right now. So if the Clippers don't win a championship or have some struggles or whatnot, they could both be out of there in 2 years. And, a lot of the rosters is kind of old now. Shea was the last true cornerstone young guy. I mean, I guess you could throw Landry Shamet in there. I just wrote about how really good he is. But, those moves were great. And I think, honestly, the rest of their summer has been maybe not as good or as flashy, but still really solid. Getting Mo Harkless, bring back JaMychal Green for cheap, re-signing Zubac, maybe slight overpay, but locking him up for the next few years, bringing in Pat Patterson, re-signing Rodney Magruder to a pretty nice deal. I think they've had a really good summer.
Yeah, obviously, I never thought Kawhi was going to stay in Toronto. I said that from the get-go. It definitely felt like it was going to be an LA destination. And as you mentioned, Rob, the Lakers just never really felt real. It just didn't feel like he was going to want to play with LeBron and AD. Why would he want to take, second or third string to those guys? And like you said, I mean, the Paul George, I still remember I was sleeping. It's like 5 a.m. when all these stuff came up. I remember waking up and seeing the Paul George trade first and being like, oh, wow, I didn't who thought Paul George, after re-signing with OKC, was going to get traded this past offseason? I don't think anyone could have predicted that.
Yeah.
Then you get the superstar on Paul George. It's what Kawhi wanted, what the Clippers needed to do to get Kawhi. Now, granted, they're on 2-year deals. As you mentioned, there is some concern there. A lot of the assets are gone. This isn't a relatively young team at all. So there is some risk to that. But the fact of the matter is, when you can get 2 elite star-level players in Kawhi and Paul George, you make that deal any day of the week. As you mentioned, they were able to bring back Beverly, Zubac, Mo Harkless, I thought was a really good signing as well. They've done all the right things. I mean, this is a extremely deep Clippers team. And then JaMychal Green, too, right? They brought him back. So
yeah, they did. Very cheap.
Yeah, very cheap. And taking a swing on Patrick Patterson, I don't hate either. It was a very good Clippers offseason with Kawhi and Paul George headlining it.
I think it could argue that it's probably better than most Clipper fans imagine because, I mean, you thought maybe you're going to get Kawhi, but you didn't think maybe the second star would be a guy like Paul George. I know there was rumblings about KD, but that never seemed really likely. So
Yeah.
to pick up two of the best two-way wings in the NBA is just an incredible offseason. And like Kory said, it happened on the East Coast, like in the middle of the night. I woke up in the middle of the night to get something to eat and looked at my phone, and I was like, is this real? Like, because no one knew anything about it. I mean, there was rumblings about the Clippers were aggressive trying to get that second star, but no one really thought it was going to be Paul George. So
Yeah, I just want to say it's just a jump on that too. It's funny, like the name I remember hearing so often was Jimmy Butler, right? It was Jimmy
yeah,
Butler, Kawhi, and getting a guy like Paul George is just like two notches above Jimmy Butler, just because of the offensive versatility of Paul George. So, like you said, it was completely unseen.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I love, like you guys mentioned, the other moves they made. Like I think Mo Harkless, a nice complementary player, and then bringing back guys from last year like Beverly Green, Zubac, and McGruger, and it just gives you that full team. And I think that's an underrated thing. Like you see a lot of teams pick up these big stars or form these great duos, but they don't necessarily have a team around them. That's one thing I like about the Clippers is the great team building.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clippers fans were mostly fairly high on getting Kawhi. Again, I agree completely. I don't think any of them thought that they would get Paul George. And even if they did, I think, most Clippers fans thought a lot of their team from last year would be gone, not just Gallo and maybe one or two of the young guys, but certainly Beverly, Green. These guys were considered basically out the door because of the money it would take to get these superstars in. But the Clippers were able to bring them back with savvy maneuvering, and because those guys took a little bit less than they might have taken elsewhere. And yeah, I mean, it was just a fantastic summer. I mean, for me, I was still awake. I was on the West Coast, and you know, I saw the Chris Haynes tweet about Kawhi and double checked to make sure that the check mark was real.
It's
And
what
it
you got to
was,
do nowadays, right?
yeah, and it was very celebratory. And then 5 minutes later, the Woj tweet about Paul George popped up, and mayhem struck. But yeah, I mean, that was a wild night. It was just a crazy week, that first week of free agency with all the rumors and the Twitter people and just all that kind of stuff. It was a very, very interesting summer that turned out very well for Clippers fans. I mean, we still need to see what the results are like and if the team actually wins and is good. But you can't have asked for a better summer if you're a Clippers fan.
Yeah, you did what, the front office did what they could. They put the team in the best position possible to succeed. So it's just about executing and guys staying healthy. But talking about departures, Gallinari out, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Garrett Temple, Wilson Chandler, Tyrone Wallace, and Darius Thornwell. Which of these guys, other than Shea Gilgeous-Alexander that we talked about before, do you wish they were able to keep?
I mean, Gallo. It has to be Gallo. If you start him alongside Paul George and Kawhi, that's an insane 2-3-4 right there. Certainly injury prone, and he might not be quite as effective playing alongside PG and Kawhi because Gallo does like the ball in his hands. He likes to make his moves. He wouldn't have as high usage with those two guys, but I mean, he was still the best player in the Clippers last year. He's better than Tobias Harris or Lou Williams. And he would be great. If not him or Shea, I'd probably say Garrett Temple. They could just use that kind of versatile swing man, at the end of their bench. But yeah, it has to be Gallo.
Yeah, I think Gallinari as well would be the guy you're going to miss the most. Was an honorable mention for All NBA third team, and rightfully so. He was extremely, durable too. He was healthy, which was the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Looked in shape this year. So shout out to Gallinari for coming in so ready to work. And then, of course, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander showed a lot of promise in that rookie season.
Yeah, you guys nailed it. Gallinari stayed healthy and looked like the player that a lot of people thought he could be if he was able to maintain health. I'm happy to hear that about Garrett Temple, obviously being a Nets fan, so hopefully that works out for Brooklyn. But moving on to the biggest X factor for next season, non-player. So this could be like the front court play, passing, playmaking, something along those lines. What do you think is the biggest X factor for the Clippers?
Oh, it's health. I mean, it could if you're excluding health because health is kind of the biggest X factor for any team.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd probably say playmaking. I think as great as Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are, neither of them is really great passers or playmakers. They're more functional than anything else. Pat Beverly, probably an underrated playmaker. He's not super flashy, but he doesn't turn the ball over. But none of those guys is great. Really, the best passer and playmaker on the team is Lou Williams, who will come off the bench and who's a big defensive liability. So that's not great. I mean, I think if they have a weakness, it's either that or interior defense. So I'm gonna say, yeah, probably playmaking is the biggest X factor. Can the Clippers get enough playmaking and passing to get the ball moving and not stagnate offensively?
Yeah, for me, it's funny. I went your second route. My biggest X factor is interior defense and just rebounding in general. There obviously Zubac has shown flashes of that. Montrezl Harrell, as we know, is an absolute monster as a sixth man off the bench. I'm not sure if he gets a larger role next season, perhaps. But for me, it's going to be how can they defend the paint and how much do they give up on the boards would be my biggest X factor.
Yeah, I think creating for others is the biggest X factor for me. Kind of like Robert talked about the playmaking, making offense easy for others. Not a lot of isolation basketball. It's going to be tough to do that the entire regular season. We know in the playoffs it doesn't quite matter as much, but in the regular season you want to make life easy for your guys. And then also, like you mentioned, Kory, I think the big play, mostly the center play. Can Zubac be a really good starting center for an entire season? What kind of depth do they have in that area? So that'd be the X factor for me. But what do you guys think the starting lineup is going to be on opening night?
That's really tricky. It's something Clippers fans and media members have debated for the past couple months. And honestly, nobody really knows yet. There are two basic options, the Clippers going small and the Clippers going big. The Clippers going small would be something like Pat Beverly, Landry Shamet, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Ivica Zubac, with Kawhi and PG at the 3 and 4. The big lineup would be Beverly, Kawhi, PG, a 4, probably JaMychal Green, possibly Mo Harkless, and then Zubac at the 5. I think 4 of the starters are set. I think it's whether it's Shamet or whether it's a bigger wing or stretch big is, I think, the question. My guess is, assuming that we're saying Paul George will start, I don't think he will on opening night, but assuming you're just saying that would be their starting lineup,
Yep.
I think it will be the lineup with Shamet, but the Clippers fans think that the Clippers will try to not have Kawhi and PG play up a position. I just think that lineup is their best lineup, and sooner or later they're going to turn to that because they'll need Shamet's shooting and even his additional ball handling.
The only thing I'll say before I get my lineup is have fun trying to get Paul George to play the power forward. Because that was the huge issue with the Indiana Pacers is they wanted him to play the power forward, and he pretty much threw tantrums on not wanting to play against guys who were bigger than him. That would be my only worry about that. But then Kawhi could maybe play the 4 and Paul George goes to the 3 if they wanted to do that. But that would be my only issue with them going small is can Paul George put aside the fact that he has to go against somebody bigger and kind of get a little bit more physical because he just didn't like that in years past. But I would agree. I think the starting line would be something of Patrick Beverly. If you wanted to go for more shooting, Landry Shamet, Kawhi Leonard, Paul. I'd rather have Kawhi play the small ball 4, and then Paul play the 3 just because of Paul's history, with Zubac at the 5. If Paul George isn't there to start the year, I could easily see Maurice Harkless getting some of those starting minutes to start.
Yeah.
That would be my 5.
Yeah, I like that. I think you're pretty spot on there. And I think the one thing I would be more optimistic about Paul George is I think just the entire NBA is transitioning to small ball 4s. So there just isn't quite as many big guys at that 4 position for him to have to worry about. We're back in, he played for the Pacers, it seems like forever ago. What was it, 3 or 4 years ago? So there's just a lot.
Was his last year, I believe.
Yeah, so there's just a lot more bigger 4s where now you see more teams go to that small 4, so it doesn't really matter as much. And those two are interchangeable. I like the smaller lineup. I wouldn't be surprised they went with a bigger lineup and maybe threw a power forward in there, or maybe even they put Mo Harkless and then they have like extreme switchability. But I think Shamet would bring this extra spacing that they would need, especially with guys like Paul George and Kawhi getting so much attention. You have a guy like Shamet out there. He just creates so many problems for the defense because he's such a great shooter.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, I think they certainly will go to both lineups depending on the matchup. There might even be games Montrezl Harrell starts. I kind of doubt he will, but I think Harkless will start. I think JaMychal Green will start. Shamet will start. Those are probably the 3 other guys who will get minutes. I mean, I would not be shocked if Rodney McGruder gets a couple starts. The Clippers are very deep and they have a lot of options. But yeah, there's going to be some tinkering by Doc this year.
And it's kind of fun as a fan. You get to see the different lineups and how they work out. And then by the postseason, you kind of know, all right, this is our go-to lineup. But talking about players to watch next season, who will be the Clippers' most improved player?
On the Clippers, I think they are hoping it's Zubac. As you mentioned, for them to really reach that next level, he needs to provide something as an interior defender, as a rebounder, and as an offensive player in the pick and roll. And he's shown flashes of doing all those things, especially interior defense. The Clippers' defense was much, much better last year after he came over at the trade deadline. He's definitely, already fairly solid in that area. He just needs to get a little stronger and tougher to battle against guys like Joel Embiid and Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's the guy who they need to really take a step forward and be a more well-rounded player who won't get played off the court in the playoffs. I personally think their most improved player will probably be Landry Shamet. I just think he's going to be really, really good. I think he was already very good last year, and that all he needs is a few adjustments and steps forward to become much, much better. So I'm going to say Shamet, but I think the player to really watch and kind of the swing piece for the season, I think, will be Zubac.
Yeah, both of those guys are my guys to watch. I mean, Landry Shamet obviously showed that there is a ton of potential for him as a shooter. What does he develop into when he has more talent around him, more floor spacing around him? I would expect his numbers to go up. Obviously, shot 43 and 42 and 80 from the field last year, which you'd like to see as a rookie. But I think most importantly, like you mentioned, will be Zubac for the simple fact of they really need that interior defender. They need his size. They need him on the glass. And he can be a game changer depending on who they match up with. For example, a guy like Anthony Davis, you're really going to need the size of Zubac in that kind of matchup.
Yeah, both great picks. Obviously you're looking for Shamet because you made the trade for him last year. He's this young piece on the roster, and he's going to be surrounded with such great talent like we kind of hinted at earlier. There should be more open shots because teams are going to focus on PG and Kawhi more, and you guys mentioned with Zubac, they need him to be that piece, especially if they want to be a championship team because there's going to be some bigs they face in the postseason. Now, talking about the season overall, what's the worst case scenario for the Clippers this year?
I mean, the worst case scenario is pretty simple. Paul George's shoulder is not healthy, never gets healthy. He's either misses a lot of the season or he's just plays but is clearly not 100%. And Kawhi Leonard either re-injures his leg or just never really looks comfortable, misses a lot of games. The Clippers limp into the playoffs and they lose in, the first round to, let's say, a healthy Warriors team or the Lakers or even a team like the Nuggets. With an unhealthy or inactive Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I mean, I'd say a true worst case scenario would be that they miss the playoffs. I'm going to take this as worst case realistic scenario.
Yeah.
Which is that, and I think like a 7 or 8 seed, winning about the same many games they won last year, like high 40s, and just kind of sputtering out due to injuries.
Worst case scenario would be right up the same alley. Obviously, this team can't stay healthy. We see maybe Kawhi has another quad injury of some sort. Paul George's shoulders never get right. And this first year doesn't go according to plan. And then that second year, there's even more pressure to succeed.
Yeah, pretty much spot on. It's just the team doesn't gel. Injuries hurt them throughout the season. They land a lower seed, get knocked out in the first round or the second round against a team that's gelling a little bit better or just more talented. And now, what would be best case scenario?
Best case scenario is Paul George comes back, at the start of the season or very soon afterwards. His shoulders are healthy. He's MVP level Paul George. Kawhi Leonard is able to get through the season healthy. His leg is load managed well enough that it's not really an issue in the playoffs. The Clippers gel. They're able to integrate those guys into the players they already have. They have one of the best defenses in the league. They have 2 guys who are just about unstoppable in isolation, and they kind of bulldoze through the playoffs and win the NBA championship.
I mean, right there. Best case scenario, they win a championship. Or I won't even say best case scenario can just be the Western Conference Finals or higher. So I don't think necessarily in year one of all these guys being together that the Western Conference Finals would be necessarily a loss. I mean, that's still reaching a high plateau. Obviously, best case scenario is the championship. I wouldn't say making the Western Conference Finals would be a negative, but I think
I agree with that. I mean, I
right.
think between integrating new players and Paul George starting out the year with an injury, and just the Clippers never making a Western Conference Finals before. I mean, I think certainly expectations for fans is mostly for a title, but I don't think a Western Conference Finals berth or the finals and a loss would really be that disappointing.
Yeah, it'd be a success in some way, but for me, best case scenario, pretty simple. NBA championship. You have arguably one of the, if not the best duo in the NBA, one of the best duos, a great team like we talked about. So I think a championship is a real possibility. Obviously, if they're able to maintain health. Now, getting to our actual predictions for the season, where will the Clippers finish in their division?
I'll say that they finish first.
I will say they finish first as well.
Yeah, I think I have them first too, long as obviously, Paul George is able to get back and Kawhi's not dealing with anything. Because, the Lakers are going to also be resting their guys, so it's not as much of a concern. What is your actual prediction for the season outcome?
I think they go 54-28. They're the third or fourth seed in the Western Conference, and they lose in the NBA Finals to the Sixers.
I have them with 56 wins, finishing third in the Western Conference.
What's your playoff outcome? Don't try to sell it short.
I mean, I think they're going to make it. I think they're going to go at least to the Western Conference Finals. I'm not ready to say they're going to win it all, but it's Western Conference. They're one of my three teams in the West making possibly the NBA Finals.
I guess we'll let you slide for that one. But actual prediction for me, I'm right in between you guys. 55 wins, I think a 3 seed, and I'm going to give them a Western Conference Finals appearance and then lose in 7 to the Lakers. I know you don't want to hear that, Robert. I'm sorry.
That'll be rough. That'll be really rough.
Any other topics or storylines you guys want to cover before we talk League Pass?
In terms of players to watch, I think Montrezl Harrell was mentioned. I think, he's a guy who works extremely hard. He's been developing his three-point shot. He got much better as a passer towards the second half of last season. He's somebody who's a bit limited overall due to his size. Like, he's never going to be a great defender. But I think if he can get that shot down and is a little bit quicker at reading the court, he can be much better than he already was last year. He was already really, really good last year. So he's definitely somebody to watch. And I would keep an eye on the trade, on trade deadline. The big name is of course Andre Iguodala right now, but I think there's a pretty good chance the Clippers make some moves, even if they're just small ones, to round out the end of their bench and maybe shore up a little entering the playoffs.
Yeah, Montrezl Harrell, I watched him last year pretty much steal a game away from the Nets because he was just such a monster on the board with those second chance points. But that's a great point about the trade stuff. What do you think they would be able to trade if they were to make a trade at the deadline? Because obviously they traded so many picks and swaps in that Paul George deal.
I think it would be something like Mo Harkless and either one of their remaining first-round picks or, second-year guy Jerome Robinson for an upgrade. Like that package would work for Iggy. It would work for some other pieces. Something like that. Harkless is an expiring deal, fairly large contract, so it'd be able to absorb some bigger guys. Robinson or picks as a sweetener it's a pretty attractive deal. It should be able to get them some fairly tangible upgrade.
Do you feel like Iguodala will be on the Clippers this season? I know there's been a lot of rumors, and I've even talked to some people that have heard that it's almost a done deal that he'll be on the team before the season even starts.
I don't think that. I mean, I just wrote today about how I would not expect him to be on this team before the season starts. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he was. Like, I'm not betting against it. I just don't think the Grizzlies really have an incentive to trade him now, or especially, there's just no reason to buy him out unless he's really threatening to upset their season, their chemistry, which I can't see him doing. Does he end up on the team? I think there's a pretty good possibility he does. The Grizzlies want to trade him or will want to because they'll want to flip him for assets, and there are only a handful of teams who would probably really be interested in him and who he'd be interested in. So, I think the Clippers are a pretty natural fit. But when it happens, I don't know. Teams like the Lakers will certainly be in the running too, or, any of the contenders like the Bucks, the Sixers, any of these teams. I think the Nuggets would certainly have some interest.
True.
I'd say there's pretty decent chance he is, but I would certainly not bet on him just being on the Clippers this year.
Kory, any other thoughts on the Clippers, storyline-wise, topic-wise?
I just think it's going to be an extremely fun team to watch, and if you're a Clippers fan, or even if you're looking for a team to root for, this is going to be a very easy team, I think, to root for.
Yeah, I appreciate the Clippers obviously kind of being a little quote unquote little brother to the Lakers. Being a Nets fan, it's the same thing with the Knicks.
Yeah.
So I was kind of happy to see the Clippers come out on top and really just change perspective and the whole culture for that thing. And Steve Ballmer's just done great things with them. Lawrence Frank, Doc Rivers, just everybody coming together. It's going to be a really fun season for the Clippers. And talking about that, where would you rank them on League Pass 1 through 10?
So it's interesting because if you go League Pass strictly by League Pass, which is how much they'll appear, I wouldn't actually rate them that high because they have so many games on national TV that they're not even going to be on League Pass for like a third of the year. If you're just going League Pass in terms of just being fun and just being a team to switch over to watch too, I think they're going to be like a 10. They should be one of the more entertaining teams in the league. They should be really competitive. They're a very feisty team. I expect them to really get up for big games like against the Lakers, against any of the other top teams. Those should probably be some really fun contests. I mean, most of them are going to be on national TV, not on League Pass. But if you're going by that 10, if you're going by the more traditional, like, a classic League Pass team, kind of like the Nuggets were a couple years ago when Jokic was on the ascent, honestly, probably not that high because they're going to be in the national spotlight and on national television so much. So in that case, maybe more like a 7. But just in terms of pure enjoyment and basketball entertainment, I think they're a 10.
Yeah, we're pure enjoyment over here. Kory, what you got?
I want to say I love the fact that you took into account that this team probably won't be on League Pass a lot because they have so many national televised games. But for me, it's going to be next to the highest level. It might only be a 9 to start the year until they're fully healthy, but I think this is a 10. I mean, you have Kawhi Leonard, you have Paul George, you have one of the most entertaining six-man in Lou Williams, and even Montrezl Harrell to a degree, as you mentioned, Nick, that Nets game, the overtime game winner, right? Is that the same game that Lou Will hit the game winner?
He was big in that game, but he was a bigger in a game at Barclays Center where I think the Clippers were down 10 and he just had a monster second half.
Oh, well, regardless, fun to watch, having a high energy guy. You have Landry Shamet, who I think is a fun rookie. Doc Rivers is an animated head coach, which also brings entertainment. So I think overall, it's just going to be a very entertaining team to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 9.8 here, just right on the cusp. I think sometimes the really, really good teams aren't a 10 because like there's blowouts where when you watch almost like a pretty good team or a team that doesn't necessarily play great defense, they're a little bit more fun. We know the Clippers are going to play some really good defense with some of the guys they have, and they might just dominate a couple teams. So I'm going to go with like a 9.8 here, but still one of the top teams to watch in the league. Anytime you have two of the best players in the league, it's hard not to watch that team. Now, go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I expect they're going to be on national TV a lot. I'm honestly, as the season goes along, they're probably going to get even more games. I'm sure some of the other games will get flexed out. Even if I don't really count it as national, they're going to be on NBA TV all the time. I mean, there's going to be some sort of saturation with them, but they're going to be really good. Most of the guys are pretty easy to root for. I think really probably the only player who a decent amount of people have issues with is probably Paul George. But I mean, the rest of the team is super likable. So they're going to be on a lot. People are going to really like them. And yeah, it should be a really fun season.
Yeah, I'd say people probably have a love-hate relationship with Pat Bev too. Some people love him, some people hate him, but I agree. I think Lou Williams is a guy that people love to watch. Montrezl Harrell, we talked about him, and then some of the young guys on the team. But in terms of a TV show comparison, and now you can take this two ways. You could take a show that's kind of plot compares to the Clippers season, or just a TV show in terms of watchability you would compare to the Clippers.
If we're just doing watchability, I'm going to say It's Always Sunny.
That's a good one.
This is my favorite show to just watch. Maybe not the best show, but just a great watchable show. In terms of plot, I mean, something ending up with a big success at the end of the year. I mostly watch comedies, so I don't really know. I don't have a great plot content comparison, so I'll just go with Always Sunny.
I went with The Office for similar reasons, for the fact that I can put on The Office and I'm going to enjoy it. And I feel like there's going to be a Clippers season where I'm going to put on a game and I'm going to find enjoyment. Because even though Paul George is a very, maybe not the most likable player in the league right now, I still have a lot of love for Paul George for the fact that growing up, I had those Pacer teams in which he was so prevalent and growing onto the stage. So getting to watch my favorite player, or one of my favorite players, alongside Kawhi is going to be enjoyable. And The Office, it's timeless.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. Both great picks because they're both shows that like if they're on, you're gonna watch them because they're just always good. And I feel like it's gonna be the same thing with the Clippers. Is like, oh, a Clippers game is on, it's gonna be pretty hard to turn that off. So I went with one of my favorite shows, Burn Notice. So, like we kind of talked about, this is gonna be one of the best teams to watch, not only because of talent but also just likability with a lot of the players. Any other thoughts from you guys?
Not particularly. There's gonna be a lot of coverage on them this season, so I don't know. It's not gonna be quite like Lakers level of saturation or prime, big three Miami Heat levels, but there's gonna be a lot. So I expect the backlash to happen at some point, but generally I think they'll be pretty likable. Um, I would watch for trades. I think picking up a point guard or a big man could be something that happens at some point this year. So yeah, that's definitely something I would keep an eye on is trade rumors with the Clippers because I do think they make at least one move during the season.
Robert, you oh, go ahead, Kory.
I'm gonna say whether even if it's not a trade, the buyout market, depending on who gets bought out and who's coming back from China. Even when we get to that part of the season, will be very interesting to watch for this Clippers team. As we mentioned, there's a lot to be happy about, and a lot to look forward to with the Los Angeles Clippers, which is weird because you normally hear Los Angeles and you think Lakers, but the Clippers to me are just they're an intriguing team.
Yeah, and that's a great point with the buyout market because in years past they're not necessarily a contender. Now going to the season, they're one of the top teams, and people want to play with a guy like Kawhi or Paul George. But Robert, you've been great on here. Tell the people where they can find you on Twitter and find your work.
So on Twitter, I'm at RichHomieFlom. It's every year it gets a little bit more dated, but I refuse to change it.
Classic Twitter handle.
In 2 years, I don't know if anybody will know who Rich Homie Quan is or was, but it is what it is. And my work can be found on Clips Nation, where I'm the managing editor. It's the SB Nation LA Clippers site. I write stuff most days of the week. During the season, it's probably going to be just about every day. I have my own podcast, where I co-host it, called The Law of the Jam, the Pod, which runs usually weekly. And we just added a new show to the Clips Nation podcast network called Clip Fix, which I will be producing, and that will be more of an interview post-game type show. So yeah, that's where all my work can be found. But I am always available for other podcasts. I love coming on and doing these and talking about Clippers stuff. And I am also a writer for Blazers Edge. And yeah, I'm probably gonna have an article coming up there pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely. And we'd love to get you back on because obviously it seems like the Clippers are going to have a deep postseason run, always get some extra playoff coverage. But always a pleasure with you, Kory. You can find Kory at KWald Hoops. Obviously, his works on OTGbasketball.com. Also hosts Full Access Hoops. You can find me on Twitter at OTG_Nick. And I also host the Brooklyn Buzz. Like I said, guys, great show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And you can check out the outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGbasketball.com, Google Play, and YouTube.
Peace out, knuckleheads.